Can you just tell me about the process itself of like what does it genuinely take to design a van and pay for it?
Uh-huh.
And I'd love to hear like what that conversation was like with your girlfriend and the rest of your family. Like, yeah, well, like what was that process like, sort of prepping it all before you actually took it on the road?
Yeah, so it started as kind of like something I just really wanted to do, but it wasn't really a possibility because I was going to the office every day and I didn't have a lot of money and it just wasn't a real thing that I could possibly do. But I'd always like thought it would be cool to live in a van or buy a van or build a van or do one of those things. After a couple of years of working my job, I had saved up a decent amount of money, not too much, maybe like $6,000, so like nothing crazy. And I got approved for a credit card through my government job for $15,000, and my job went full telework, and like all of the pieces started to align where I had some money that I could spend. I had enough money to do it. I had the time to do it, and I was able to actually enjoy it and live in it because my job was full telework. And then one day I was just texting my friend and I was like, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to go buy a van and figure it out and get it done. So pretty much after that day, basically, I think it was like 3 or 4 months of just planning. I would go look for which van I wanted. What kind of things do I want? Do I want to be able to stand in my van? Do I want a fridge in my van? How much power am I going to need? How much power do I even use? I don't even know. I've never had to track how much power I use. So like I had to calculate how much power do I use? How much water am I going to need? Like, do I really need a bathroom? Can I sacrifice that? Does it mean that much to me? You kind of got to pick and choose like the things that you want to sacrifice and the things that you don't. So like some people might not want to shower in their van because they're going to be in cities a lot and they can go to Planet Fitnesses. Some people might need a full bathroom, like a composting or incinerator or some crazy fancy toilet or something like that. For me, that stuff wasn't necessary. So like the planning period was kind of figuring out what I needed and then also like just figuring out the questions that I needed to answer. So like I didn't even know what questions I needed to answer. I didn't know what type of batteries are the best for all types of weather, and then all of this, how to calculate the amps and the watts and all the stuff that you need to power all of this stuff in the van. So like I took 4 or 5 months specifically learning how to do all of the different aspects of the van, specifically the electrical system, because that's the thing that scared me the most. So I spent a lot of time and I basically just built my entire electrical system on paper and was like, okay, I think I can do this. I know exactly how many pieces I'm going to need, how many parts I'm going to need. I know exactly how much it's going to cost. I think I can do this. I can theoretically do this on paper. Built enough confidence that I can do this in real life. The only step now is to actually go ahead and do it. So once I got built up the confidence and like all the woodworking, all the plumbing, all the electrical that I could do it, I started looking for vans and I knew that I didn't want to spend too much money on a van. And I was lucky because I got in right before, I mean, I was still, when the vans were kind of expensive, but I got in before they really took off and got crazy expensive like they are today. I kind of was looking at the dimensions of all of them. The Transits are a little bit higher, the ProMasters are a little bit wider, and I wanted to be able to sleep horizontally to save the kind of space long ways in my van, as opposed to like having to sleep long ways in the van and like cutting off like an extra foot and a half of the living space. And since the ProMasters are wider, that kind of made the decision for me. And also, biased opinion, I kind of think the ProMasters look cooler on the outside. So, and then after I did that, I went and I searched all over the country. I didn't just like seclude myself to only searching in Maryland where I was living at the time. I kind of looked all over the country for all these vans, and I found a really good deal on a van in Hooksett, New Hampshire. I think it was New Hampshire, one of those northeastern states. But the town was called Hooksett, and I found the van and I contacted the dealership and I was like, I bought it. I just bought it sight unseen, paid the deposit, got all the insurance for it and everything, sent them over all the paperwork. And then I paid them to ship it to me, which was $400, which was paid through the loan. So I didn't really have to pay the money out of pocket. And then it took like 3 weeks and I was like, they didn't have a courier. They didn't have anyone to carry the van. And I was like, I can't wait any longer. Like, I need to get started on this if I want to get done by the summertime. So I just ended up flying up there from the dealership. They picked me up at the airport, drove me over, and then gave me the keys. And I drove it 15 hours or 11 or 12 hours home from the northeastern state, wherever it was, back to Maryland. And then the next day I got started building. And then it took me 6 months to build it. And I definitely had some setbacks. I had some times where I felt like I was way in over my head, especially when I got really into the electrical system. Because when you build a van, the first thing you have to do after you do your floor and all that kind of stuff, even you do I think I did it before I did my floor, but you have to pre-wire everything. So you have to have an exact, somewhat roughly exact plan for where your electrical plugs are going to be, where your appliances are going to be, where your lights are going to plug in, or your switches are going to be, because you have to wire to the switch and then to the lights and make sure you have the correct wiring to each, so you knew you had to do it. And when I was doing that, I just got way too overwhelmed and I was like, I don't know if I'm doing this right. I don't want to get all these walls up and realize that I did it wrong and then have to like backtrack and fish wires through the finished walls. And I was just like super stressed out, but I kind of just like was like, whatever, I'm going to do it. And then it just kind of ended up working out, thankfully, because I did a bunch of research and like kind of calmed myself down a little bit. But yeah, it took me 6 months to build it. And then lived in it for 3 months full time on the road while I was working my job, and then another like 4 or 5 months back at home for the winter. And then now I'm back out on the road, and I've been on the road for roughly 4 or 5 months this time.
How did your girlfriend take it when you first threw the idea her way?
So, I mean, she was definitely apprehensive because she knew that it meant that it was going to take up a lot of my free time and like a lot of the time I had to hang out with her. So it was definitely extra. I will say that was probably not just specifically with her, but like with my friends and like all of my relationships, like across the board. It definitely put a strain on like my social life very heavily because basically for the entire 6 months that I was building, I had no free time to hang out with my friends. I was living at my parents' house building it, and I didn't get to see my girlfriend as much. So it really stressed me out. And then it also stressed the people out that I was around because I never got to see them anymore, and I never got to like do all the things that I used to do. So it was a very stark change and a very quick change with like kind of no warning really. And especially for like my girlfriend and my friends, like to just process it all and try to like understand that it's not like personal. Like I'm not avoiding my friends and my girlfriend. It's just I have something that I'm really passionate about that I'm working on, and it was kind of my fault too. Like I kind of was like very narrow mindset. I didn't really like take the time to think about all of the social aspects of my life for like 6 months. So like they really took a hit, and like that's my fault. Like I've learned as I've gone that I need to like take the time to like separate the two and stop being so laser focused on the professional things that I want to do and like building my van, building my brand, like posting videos. And I gotta like take time out of my day and like give that back to my friends and my girlfriend because I can't just expect them to just sit there and wait for me to be done with what I'm doing because it's just not fair, especially if I want to take it long term. So that was definitely a very stressful aspect of it, but I'm glad that I ended up realizing it and kind of like backtracked a little bit. And now I take the time to kind of like nurture those relationships again as a boyfriend and a friend should do. So I think that's something that people don't really take into account, especially if they're building their own van. If they don't have the time or if they have friends and family, like you're not going to see them as much, especially if you're traveling. But even when you're building, it's like, unless you don't have a full-time job, it's going to take up pretty much all of your time for a set amount of months. So
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dylan Taylor. This is the YouTuber's Guide to the Galaxy. If you enjoyed this clip, be sure to give it a like. And if you want to hear more stories and insights from successful YouTubers, do consider subscribing to the channel. I'll be posting clips just like this 2, maybe 3 times a week. Full episodes of this podcast are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And I think that's all the calls to action I have for one outro recording. So, yeah. Goodbye.